Hi, I'm Ryan from Amber Elm. Today, I wanted to talk about the composer Arvo Part, process music in general, and how we can use aspects of his compositional style in our own music. Before we get into it, I just wanted to remind everyone that, as always, the video is time-stamped, so feel free to skip around. Also, after last week's video, I got a nice little bump in subscribers, so thank you so much. It really does mean a lot to me. So let's keep it going though. I'm really trying to get to 100 subscribers by June 15th, and I'll be doing something fun for the first 100 people. So like and share the video and subscribe if you want to be part of the community. So Arvo Part. When I was researching last week's video on randomness in music, I was looking up different composers who had different processes for adding randomness in their music, and I came across Arvo Part. I kept coming across Arvo Part actually. I didn't end up including him in the video because he didn't really incorporate randomness. It was actually just the opposite. His music is highly organized and painstakingly crafted out using different processes. Not only was I blown away by his music, but I was honestly a little embarrassed that I'd never heard of him. Apparently he's kind of a big deal. I spent the better part of the week doing a deep dive on him. I read about his history, the stylistic changes over his career, and a system of Tintinnabuli that he invented. Not to mention, he's also the most performed living composer in the world. He's quickly shot up on my top 5 favorite composers list. Who am I gonna bump? So this video may end up being part 1 of a series because this guy's career is so deep and so interesting. I don't want to do it a disservice by just staying surface level on everything. So if you want a part 2 or 3 of the video, comment down below. Here's the overview. Arvo Part is an Estonian composer. Modern 20th century composition techniques like neoclassicism, serialism, sonorism were introduced to Estonian composition by Part and a few of his contemporaries. His works proved to pioneer many of these techniques. His collage works, for example, were expressed in a personal and dramatic way, which was a departure from the usual lighter, playful character of the collage technique to that point. Part became one of the leading figures in Soviet avant-garde. But in his quest for a unique musical identity, he found himself in direct opposition to the Soviet authorities. His music's reception in the Soviet Union was complicated to say the least. On one hand, he was being recognized as one of the most original and outstanding composers of his generation. His pieces were being performed not just in the USSR, but outside of it as well. On the other hand, the choices he was making with his music were being considered too provocative for the USSR and having a dangerously strong impact. Part is quoted as saying, "In the course of my life, there have been several upsets. It started as far back as 1961 when I composed Necrologue, which was my first large orchestral piece. I was a student at the Conservatory of Music in Tallinn, and I had written the piece in 12-tone technique, which was at the time and place extraordinary. As a result, there was strong criticism from the highest circles. Nothing was considered more hostile than so-called influences from the West, to which 12-tone music belonged." Another huge area of contention from the Soviets was the text he was using in his pieces. In his 1968 work Credo, Part basically openly and sincerely confesses to being religious. If he was trying to hide it, he probably could have done a better job with the title. But if you know anything about the Soviet Union in the 60s, that was bad, and Credo was banned, and Part quickly fell out of favor. Because film music was one of the only fields Part could engage in, he became a freelance composer and ended up being one of the most highly sought-after film composers in Estonia through the 60s and the 70s. This is one of the animations I ended up watching. It's actually pretty good. But between 1968 and 76, Part entered his period of crisis. Years later, he was quoted as saying, "I didn't know at the time that I was going to be able to compose at all in the future. Those years of study were no conscious break, but life and death agonizing inner conflict. I had lost my inner compass, and I didn't know anymore what an interval or a key meant." That seems pretty crisisy, but I'm glad it was, because what came out of it was something amazing. As he was searching for a means of self-expression, he turned towards early music. Absorbed in studying Gregorian chant, the Notre Dame School, and Renaissance polyphony, in 1976 he resurfaced with his own musical language. He called it Tintinnabuli. It first appeared in a short piece for piano called Furalina, and was followed with the works Cantus in Memory of Benjamin Britten, Fratris, Tabula Rasa, and Spiegel im Spiegel. All of those pieces need to be listened to. I could play you a little clips of all of them, but instead I'll just link them in the description below. Tintinnabuli was more than just a musical language for Part. It was also an ideology based on his Christian values, religious practice, and a quest for truth, beauty, and purity. I bring this up because remember me telling you the Soviets weren't too happy with his text in the piece Credo? That was bad. Well, yeah, after Part's new works premiered in Estonia, they were met with more and more controversial reviews and confrontation with the Soviet Union, which ended up with him being forced to emigrate to Vienna with his wife and 2 sons. It's crazy how much a political system or regime can shape the music that comes out of it. If the Soviets we're down with faith in God, Part may not have gone on to invent this style, and who knows how the landscape of music would have changed. It wasn't until 1991, when Estonia regained their independence, that Part and his musical reputation was restored. In the 90s, his music was often performed as part of Estonian concert programs again. In the 2000s, celebrating his birthday in Estonia, it became a tradition. And not only that, but concerts in his childhood hometowns have become more common. A collection of conversations, essays, and articles on Part have been published. And there was a radio show even dedicated to him. And other long overdue honors were granted to him and his music. To me, it's a pretty amazing story of a composer finding himself, paying the price, and seeing it through. It's really inspiring and a little heartbreaking. Luckily, it has a happy ending. As for Tintinnabuli, he's been using it for over 40 years now, and it creates some of the most beautiful, haunting, rich, and spacious music I've ever heard. Now let's learn how to use it, sort of. I say sort of because, like I mentioned, I've been doing this for about a week, and I have the most surface level understanding of it. But with that understanding, I've been able to write some really interesting things. Instead of pulling up Part's works and just analyzing them, let's make our own little piece using Tintinnabuli. On the surface, it's a way to harmonize your melody. There are a few different ways to use it. Basically, you take a key, let's say B minor, and we'll harmonize each note of our melody with the notes of a triad. A B minor triad, a C major triad, it doesn't really matter. Just pick one that you like and you have to stick with it. I'm going to stick with the key of B minor and tintinnabulate. Tintinnabulate? Is that a word? I'm going to stick with it for the rest of the video. Tintinnabulate it with a B minor triad. If I play a D in the melody or the M voice, I'll play a B in the T voice because B is the closest tone to a B minor triad. That's just one way, and that would be referred to as first position inferior. First position meaning it's the first closest, inferior meaning it's under the melody note. Second position inferior would be the second closest tone in the B minor triad. So again, if we had a D in the M voice, we would tintinnabulate it with an F sharp. You could also use the first or second position superior or above. With that same D in the M voice, an F sharp above would be the first tone of the B minor triad. Second position superior would have a B in the T voice. A single line could sound something like this. But you could also add a second voice and tintinnabulate that one. And there's nothing stopping you from playing around with it. You could offset the T voice. So here's an example of two voices where one T voice is offset by an 8th note and the second T voice by a 16th note. Like I said, I've been at this for a little under a week, and I'm already seeing how this tool could come in super handy. It sounds so cinematic and engaging, and it can be so simple. And no one's saying you have to stay strict to the process. You could use this as a jumping off point and add whatever you want. And that's my favorite part of studying composers and the processes they use. It can put another tool in your chest. One of my least favorite things about YouTube is it can make complex things seem unrealistically simple. And that really isn't the point of this video. Mastering Tintinnabuli isn't something you're going to do after watching one video. It's definitely not something I'm going to do after making one video. But we can definitely start to learn the essence of it and implement those ideas and processes in our own music. If you want a deeper look into Arvo Part or Tintinnabuli, comment below and I'd be happy to go more into it in a different video. If you want to learn more information now, I'll link some of the resources that I used when I was researching the video in the description below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next week.